think the buildings actually contribute to the type of education that students get. If our students are expected to compete with the rest of the nation, or even schools down in another county, they have to have state-of-the-art buildings because education has changed. The smart boards, the desks that you could actually write on, kids can collaborate. Those are some of the soft skills that industry is looking for, and we can prepare our kids to do that with the buildings. But it also sends a signal to the students, the staff, the community that we care, that education is a priority.
And so for people in some communities where, you know, they've lived here their whole lives, their kids are adults, they don't really have much of an interest in investing in schools and the buildings themselves with their tax money, why is it maybe important for them to vote for this school bond to get more money into the schools if they don't have students in the system?
Yeah, because this is about really propelling Rhode Island into the next phase, right? Our kids are competing with kids all over the nation, all over the world. And our hopes is that our kids have this ability to be competitive, but that our schools reflect that need and our desire for our kids to be competitive. But also we want them to stay in Rhode Island. The schools mark a change in the community. When people look for housing, the number one thing they look at is schools. And it really is the hub and the center of most, if not all, communities.
So when we see buildings like this, I mean, it's just old. Like, the education, I'm sure, is great. You've toured a lot of buildings, school buildings across the state. What are your thoughts when you look at them and see the condition that they're in?
Well, I have to tell you that because I've had the opportunity to see beautiful new buildings, it makes me very sad when I walk into old buildings, buildings that really don't support the kind of instruction that our kids need today. It really says a lot about what we value. And it's just heartbreaking, actually, when you walk into buildings that, you know, the ceiling may be leaking, or that, you know, they look nice and shiny, but you know that they have like 15 layers of paint on them. Mm-hmm. And there's only one more layer that can go back on them before the paint won't cut it anymore. Mm-hmm. So we really have to push the envelope. And if we want to be in the global market, it starts with our school buildings.
And it does seem like there is an interest in doing so and investing in these buildings. I mean, we had the $250 million bond, and that, you know, was all used up, and now there's another one up for a proposal on the bond on ballots across the state. So are you hopeful that it will be passed and that people do realize the value in school buildings?
Absolutely. So we have $1.3 billion across the state, which sends a message, right? We care. We care about our education system. And, you know, what it really says to families is, this is the community that I want to really have roots in. I want to be here. I want my grandkids. If your kids are grown, you want your grandkids to go to these schools, and you want them to have the best of what we have to offer. So November 8th, if you were thinking about it, you need to know that you need to vote at that point. Make your dollars really work for the community.
And then we talked too about Providence. Obviously, you talk a lot about Providence, in particular with the state takeover of the schools, and we see how a lot of those buildings are in dire need of repairs. And with all of these equity, you know, initiatives that are there, Providence is one of the underserved communities for investing in school buildings. What's being done in the city of Providence that you've seen in making sure that those buildings are repaired to?
Well, I'll tell you, we've had 3 groundbreakings, which we're so excited about. The library in Hope has been redone. We are getting ready to release the auditorium, which at one point Hope High School was kind of the hub for the arts, and no longer. So we're hoping to revive that. But there is going to be there are new bubblers and all the, water filling stations, no longer bubblers. But there's just a lot of projects that have been undertaken in the last 2 years in a pretty significant way. So we will see that the Providence schools will look completely different. And we're going for newer and fewer. We don't want a bunch of buildings that we keep patching up. We want fewer buildings that are state-of-the-art, that our kids can be proud to attend.
So really rethinking how the school building works best for the students and how to get as many in there without them being like all stuffed in for no reason.
Well, absolutely. That is not what we're trying to do. But, you know, at some point, Providence was fixing windows or really looking at roofs, and Mario came into the picture and was like, no, we can't do that. We really have to push the envelope, and we revamped what the building projects would look like. And right now, they're really going to be phenomenal. Classical, we were just there maybe 2 months ago, really looking at what the state-of-the-art facilities would look like. It's the beacon in Providence, and the school is really in terrible shape. Most of the buildings are in Providence, but that will not be the case, and we will see them moving forward. We have our first swing space, which is the old windmill that had been vacant for maybe 10, 20 years. And will now be swing space. And what I mean by swing space is that kids will be temporarily in that building while they fix their current school, and then they will be going back. We didn't have that. So construction would take a very long time. We could only do it after school or in the summer. And now we have the ability to move a lot faster. And those of you that know about construction, the longer it takes, the more it's going to cost. So we can move in a very expedient manner, and then the Narducci Learning Center will be an actual school.
Yeah. Way down the line after all the other schools are fixed up, and it doesn't have to serve as a swing area. That's
right. It'll be one of the beautiful buildings that we have created in the last 2 years. We have the plans, and it's just pretty amazing because it's our capital city, and we have not invested in the way that we should have. We've really been doing little patch-up jobs here and there, but that's not what we're doing now.
Why now is there this change in thought that, oh, we should invest in buildings, other than you being the change?
Sure, no, it's a twofold approach. So you need resources, but you also need to identify the problem. So for years, the Providence buildings, prior to a statewide assessment, it wasn't clear how much need was there. Like, I think individuals who went to their school perhaps saw that there was need, but stepping back, there wasn't that awareness. So I think, after the report came out, we know now that the average age of elementary schools in Providence are 75 years old. So it gets to a point where it's not worth investing in windows and doors and fire alarms in buildings that perhaps should be torn down. So that's the first piece, is identification of the need, but the second piece is resources. So we've had the first $250 million bond, which really has helped transform Providence, and then locally, over the last even just 5 years, they've put up almost $500 million, the city, in bonding, which historically, there's like a 10-year period before that where they were putting up, I think, something like $40 million, which is less than communities that are a quarter of their size.
And some of that money is reimbursed by the state as well.
Yeah, and the state will reimburse, with the temporary incentives, around 90% of that will be reimbursed by the state. So it's really a joint commitment where the state's putting up a lot of its money, but it starts with the city of Providence putting up their bonds and their voters saying, yes, this is something that we want to invest in.
And so we're seeing a lot of projects across the city, right? It's not just like one specific
area,
or not just the high school.
That's correct. So it's a mix. We look at the map. The need is everywhere in Providence, not just 1 or 2 schools. But if you look at the breakdown of projects, they're spread out throughout the city. Not just now in construction, but even in planning. Again, there's a need that there's 15 wards, and there's projects going to be happening in all of them throughout the city.
And so Providence is one of the communities that can apply for the equities money too, right? The initiative.
Correct.
So
correct.
That helps too.
Yeah, so Providence was awarded about $4.5 million from the first round of funding, which helped with the Hope Auditorium and helped a few other schools. They were eligible for the first batch with 5 other communities. They're now eligible for the second round of funding, in addition to Coventry, who's now going to be part of this pool of applicants.
Oh, really?
That's correct.
So it's going to be like West Warwick, Woonsocket, Providence, Central Falls, Pawtucket, and Coventry? And
then North Providence, East Providence, Cranston, and Burville. So it's up to 10. So we have almost 3 times as much money, and then we've doubled the number of eligible communities from 5 to 10.
And starting when, this fiscal year?
So the announcement was made last week, and these 10 communities have until December 1st to submit applications. We'll review them. We have a coalition of stakeholders who rank them, and then in January we anticipate making those awards.
Okay. So last January we saw those awards being
given
out to those 5 communities. Is that what you were talking about with the shovels in the ground by next December? Those projects have to be pitched?
Sort of. So there's the last go-around, I think we had that event at Calcutt Middle School last time we met, where you can see that money was spent within 8 or 9 months. It makes a huge impact, so it can be spent fast. We gave the first 5 districts the first year until the end of this year to complete that first round of funding. The other deadline, which was critical and really ties right into Coventry, is that the General Assembly extended the housing aid incentives, so that's additional state commitment to incentivize projects to occur. So communities like Coventry, South Kingstown, and Tiverton, who perhaps would have missed out, now have a new life and a second opportunity to come forward and invest in their schools. So Coventry is taking advantage of that now.
But Coventry's still kind of in the early process of knowing exactly what they want to do with their school buildings, right?
That's correct. They've just recently formed the building committee, they selected an architect, and now it's really figuring out what they want to do. But again, if it wasn't for that second opportunity with the extension, we wouldn't even be here. They wouldn't be here yet.
Is that even enough, this extension, to be able to move that quickly and get their plans in by?
So it'll be for everyone. I know there are other communities who have asked for even longer, and obviously that's up to the General Assembly to decide, but we will work with everyone to get them through for that deadline.
So is it the same kind of criteria roughly that, you know, if it weren't for this designation as like the equities, like they fall under the need for the equities initiative because they otherwise wouldn't be able to get a good chunk of the $250 million bond?
So sort of. So we have the $250 million bond is given to every community. Mm-hmm. The way it was distributed the first time, it's tied to how big your approval is. Mm-hmm. So some communities with limited capacities are hindered by how much they can get from the bond, even though the bond goes to everyone. The Facility Equity Initiative is to help to balance that. Mm-hmm. So if someone like Pawtucket or West Warwick, who only got a small piece of the first bond because they don't have a high bonding capacity, they can come to this other fund and still do meaningful projects in their schools.
Is that why Coventry was included in this too this time?
So Coventry, yep, it's exactly right. So this is an opportunity for them to do more that they hadn't done work in the last few years, but again, that's just one piece of their longer vision. Because they extended the bonuses, they're also coming to do something more substantial.
So this would be mainly for something like we saw perhaps in Central Falls with like new furniture and maybe like a new media center, but they obviously want to revamp the whole school down the line too with maybe bond money instead of this equity.
Yeah, correct. It's in tandem. So what a lot of communities will do is, like Central Falls, for example, they'll use the facility equity to really do high impact projects that kids see, like at Calicut, and then we'll use their bond money to do new schools. So it's a balance. So that usually there's not enough bond money to do every school over. So it's a way to do both, that kids in schools that aren't becoming new are getting like new media centers, like new cafeterias, like new gyms, but they're not getting in school, but they may not feel it because it feels new inside. So it's like a mixed approach, and I would suspect the same will occur here in Coventry.